Travis Head and Steven Smith feasted on India's wayward attack in what weren't easy batting conditions to put Australia in the box seat of the WTC final by the end of day one at the Oval. Head scored his first century outside Australia, and Smith was 5 short of his 31st overall as they took Australia from 76 for 3 to 327 for 3 at stumps. Head turned his century, the first in a WTC final, into a big one, an unbeaten 146 off 156 with 22 fours and a 6. The big talking point for India remained the selection of a fourth fast bowler over R. Ashwin, a strategy that worked for them against England in 2021. They perhaps were influenced by the 6 millimeters of grass cover on the pitch and the overcast skies in the morning, but they didn't find close to the kind of control you expect from the third and fourth quicks of a form and pace attack. Between them, Umesh Yadav and Shardul Thakur bowled 32 overs for 129 runs and 1 wicket. Mohammad Shami and Mohammad Siraj were good as usual with the new ball after India put Australia in. The 12 overs in the first are conceded just 29 runs, produced the wicket of Usman Khwaja for a duck, and the 21 false responses created suggested there could have been 1 or 2 more around the corner. However, the change-up bowlers, Umesh and Thakur, provided relatively easy runs at various points after that opening spell of play. Umesh provided David Warner a half-volley second ball into the attack, and was then hit for 4 boundaries square or behind square on the off-side in his second over. Warner would have thought that was the reward he deserved after roughing it out in the first hour, but India enjoyed some good fortune as Thakur had him caught down the leg side of a short ball just before lunch. India went to Siraj and Shami, the likeliest bowlers to produce a wicket, post-lunch. Shami's first ball was a peach, seaming into a Prut Manas Labuschagne off stump. India still had a chance there if they could get it right for long enough periods. Head, who lost his number 5 position in a horses for courses policy in India, had other ideas. Shami had a left-hand batter inside. He was fresh into a new spell. The ball was still seaming. He beat Head early on, but Head soon imposed his intent on India. The 5th ball that Head faced was only slightly wide and slightly short, and he crashed it away for 4. His attacking game through the offside soon had India fumbling for ideas. They moved a slip out to put a sweeper back on the offside, but then Head was quick to cash in on anything too straight. Siraj conceded to such boundaries. In a small byplay at the other end, Smith found it difficult to adjust to the uneven bounce and the sideways movement. His response was different to Head's. He continued to fight it out, whereas Head didn't mind attacking. On the surface, Head looked better, but he offered false responses more often than Smith. Smith's control percentage was 90 to Head's 69. Those, again, are their roles. Smith builds, Head counterattacks. Things became easier for Smith when Thakur went searching once too often. Thakur is an ambitious bowler who bowls full and straight more often than the others. It probably works when you are bowling off the pressure created by 3 world-class quicks. Playing as the third seamer practically, he probably went full once too often. Smith cashed in, and a 16-run over resulted. With the ball still doing a bit for the quicks, it said a lot of India's options that they went to Ravindra Jadeja before Umesh in the middle session. For a while Thakur went to the leg attack that worked for India in Australia, but Smith was well set and was willing to ride the period out. Australia went into tea at 170 for 3 with Head on 60 off 75 and Smith 33 off 102. India began the final session with Umesh and Jadeja, the least likely bowlers to take a wicket at that point. That told you all about the state India found themselves in. Soon Shami came back, and India began to test Head with the short stuff, probably too late in the piece. Head took it on, going hard at it. He bottomised two hooks from well outside off, but then began ramping the ball. He was by no means at home against the short ball, but the runs kept flowing. Umesh began to leak to Smith from the other end. Woefully behind the over rate, the 2.5-hour final session began to look even longer for India. Head took 32 off the first 18 balls he faced in the session. Siraj and Shami then placed a fine deep third to block the ramp, had men catching on the hook, and kept bending their backs. Shami bowled a 7-over spell, Siraj kept drawing uneven bounds, Head went through the 90s looking uncertain but riding his luck. He was hit on the head twice, but kept hooking. By the time Head brought up his 100, India were forced to make bowling changes, and batting seemed easier again. India took the new ball 20 minutes to stumps, which brought about more plays and misses from Head but also 3 more boundaries for him. Smith ended the day with an ominous cover drive for 4 off the last ball. The day too had dawned clear and sunny with Steven Smith 5 short of his 31st Test 100 and Travis Head 4 short of 150. They raced past their respective milestones quickly, with Mohammad Siraj offering Smith a pair of straight half-volleys in the first over of the morning to start the day on an ominous note for India. Things improved, though, with a sustained short ball attack at Head's body finally yielding success when the left-hander gloved Siraj down the leg side on 163. Mohammad Shami then produced a beauty to send back the number 6 green, slanting a full ball in from wide of the crease to draw a loose drive away from the body. Smith was next to go, pushing away from his body at an innocuous Shardul Thakur away color to play on for 121. India had struck 3 times before Australia reached 400, and may have hoped to wrap up their innings not too long after, but a counter-attacking 48 from Alex Carey carried the score past 450. Carey rode his luck particularly against Umesh Yadav, who beat his bat repeatedly in a short spell after lunch before he fell in familiar fashion, LBW attempting a reverse sweep against a stump-to-stump delivery from Jadeja. That was the only Australian wicket to fall to spin. Siraj ended as India's most successful bowler, finishing with figures of 4 for 108, while Shami and Thakur bagged 2 apiece. For all that, India's major issues came about not because they picked 4 quicks but because of how they bowled. On a pitch bouncier than the typical Indian surface, they needed to pitch the ball fuller than the traditional good length to challenge the stumps consistently and bring all modes of dismissal into play. They didn't do this consistently enough, and even though their bowlers fought back through the first half of day to take 7 for 142, it perhaps came a little too late, because they had let Australia run away to 327 for 3 on day 1. Bowled out almost exactly halfway into the day's play, Australia's fast bowlers came out and showed how it's done, on a pitch that was now beginning to sport cracks all over its surface. Mitchell Starc and Pat Cummins overpitched frequently at the start of their new ball spells, and Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill got off to a breezy start, but it seemed a matter of time before the quicks figured out the ideal length full but not drivable. Cummins hit this length with the last ball of the 6th over, nipping it in and trapping the half-forward Rohit in front. Then Scott Boland, a bowler seemingly designed in a lap to bowl in these conditions, bowled a wicket in dipper to follow 9 probing dot balls to the 2 openers that Gill fatally shouldered arms to. Cheteshwar Pujara and Virat Kohli then put on 20 either side of tee, looking in good touch but always wary of the seam movement and occasional inconsistent bounce that characterized this surface, before Cameron Green produced a replica of the Boland ball that had bowled Gill. Pujara produced a replica of Gill's response, and India were 50 for 3, all of their top 3 either bowled or LBW. It became 71 for 4 when the returning Starc joined the party with a vicious delivery to Kohli, slanted across from left arm over and taking off from a length. Kohli, pressing onto the front foot, was in no position to negotiate it safely. All he could do was glove the ball to second slip. Rahane could have fallen soon after, had Cummins not overstepped when he bowled a pitch that straightened from that perfect foolish length to beat his outside edge and hit his back pad roughly in front of off stump. Rahane reviewed after being given out on the field, and replays picked up the no-ball. Ball tracking showed to Reds and an umpire's call verdict on the line of impact. Batting against the old Duke's ball has been significantly easier than it has been against the new one over the last two English summers, with numbers 5 and 6 averaging a world-leading 53.08 years since the start of 2022, while numbers 1 to 4 average 31.28. They have only done worse in the West Indies, 31.00, in this period. After a nervy early period that included that close LBW call and a pair of leading edges from Jadeja, India's fifth wicket pair certainly looked in a lot more comfort than their top-order counterparts. Jadeja, who profited from Australia's bowlers Stark in particular overpitching frequently to him, rattled along at close to a run a ball, while Rahane, returning to Test cricket for the first time since January 2022, ticked over more sedately while looking just as fluent. India would have hoped their partnership extended to stumps. Lorne punctured those hopes, striking with his 9th ball of the match. The fast bowlers did the bulk of the damage, but there was also a wicket for Nathan Lyon, off a dipping, turning off break that had Ravindra Jadeja, India's top scorer, nicking to first slip some 15 minutes from stumps to end a 71-run fifth-wicket stand with Ajinkya Rahane. The wicket, and the manner it came, may have added more fuel to the debate surrounding India's selection, and the exclusion of R. Ashwin against an Australian lineup heavy on left-hand batters. Australia's bowlers showed India just where they had gone wrong on day one, their quicks settling into the perfect length on a still helpful oval pitch as their side took control of the World Test Championship final. By stumps on day two, Australia had reduced India to 151 for 5 in reply to their first innings total of 469. India hung in admirably on the third day of the WTC final through fighting runs from Ajinkya Rahane and Shardul Thakur and a better bowling effort than in the first innings, but by the end of the day it was apparent they had lost too much ground on the first 2 days. They began the day 318 behind with half their side gone, took body blows to somehow reduce the deficit to 173, but ended the day 296 behind with 6 Australian wickets still standing. India began each session of the day knowing the best they could do was stay alive. They managed to not get blown away, but in the long, final session, Australia progressed steadily to leave India somewhere between just alive and out of the game. Scott Boland began metronomically and snuck past KS Bharat's inside edge to bowl him second ball of the day. Pat Cummins and Boland then proceeded to torture the two batters, Rahane and Thakur, with uneven bounce out of the pitch. For the best part of the first hour, they were relentless and quick. Thakur was forced to take a painkiller and wear padding on both his forearms. However, it was still not a perfect display in the field from Australia. Cummins ended up with 6 no-balls with wickets of 3 of them. Following Ravindra Jadeja and Rahane on day 2, he missed out on Thakur's wicket on day 3. 3 catches went down in the slip cordon. Mitchell Starc struggled for control. Once they saw of the threat of Cummins and Boland, Rahane and Thakur began to score freely. By lunch, Rahane was 11 short of what would have been a special century on Test comeback, and Thakur 14 short of a third 50 in 3 innings at the Oval. The 60-over-old ball had stopped misbehaving by now, and India had a good shout at cutting down the 209-run deficit significantly before the second new ball. Post-lunch, though, Rahane followed a wide-ish delivery and edged it only for Cameron Green to pull off a spectacular catch at gully. The next 3 wickets could at just 35, though Thakur did manage to get to his half-century. India bowled with better control than they did in the first innings. Mohammad Siraj, in particular, extracted uneven bounce after nicking David Warner off early. Twice the bat fell out of Marnus Labuschagney's hands on impact, much like it had done earlier with Thakur. Once he was swept off his feet. Umesh Yadav benefited from the pressure created with his first wicket of the match as Usman Khwaja wafted at a wide delivery. At 24 for 2, India would have hoped for further inroads, especially with Labuschagney struggling, but Steven Smith played a breezy knock to push India back. Having set himself up for a long dig in the first innings, Smith now looked for quick runs, racing away to 12 off his first 7 balls. India's second string of quicks now bowled with spread-out fields as Smith looked set for a big, effortless knock. Then Smith tried to charge Jadeja for the third time in the test. On the first 2 occasions, in the first innings, he managed to get enough of a half hit to avoid mid-off, but this time there was enough grip from the surface to take the edge for Point to take the catch. To get Smith out for just 34 when he was batting at a control rate of above 90% was a relief for India. Jadeja then used the rough outside the left-hand batters of stump to get rid of Travis Head. Labuschagney, standing well outside the crease to face the India quicks, never really looked in control. He ended the day 41 off 118 but, along with Green, he denied India any further success. To their credit, India didn't allow them easy runs, going at well under 3 and over. It was half the job done for Australia, who would want to give their fast bowlers at least 24 hours with their feet up before they begin their final push for the title. During the first session of the day 4, Green had had a far different effect on the crowd, keeping them quiet as he added 18 runs in 87 balls to his overnight score of 7. His dismissal was in keeping with the tone of his innings. He attempted to pad away a Ravindra Jadeja delivery from over the wicket only for the ball to hit his pad and roll onto the wicket. By then, Australia had added 44 to their overnight 123 for 4 while losing 2 wickets in 19 overs. Marnus Labuschagney, the other batter, dismissed, nicking Umesh Yadav to first slip. India had bowled with discipline while extracting just enough from the surface to keep the batters vigilant. With Australia's lead just 340, they may have hoped to wrap their innings up before it got to 400. Alex Carey, however, ensured that it swelled well beyond that figure, scoring an opportunistic 66 to go with his 48 in the first innings, and putting on 93 for the 7th wicket with Mitchell Starc. Both batters began cautiously and had their moments of discomfort, particularly against Jadeja finding sharp turn and bounce from the footmarks outside the left-handers off stump, but grew increasingly confident as India's quicks tired. Mohammad Shami, who had bowled frugally and beaten the bat multiple times without any reward in his previous spells, came back when India took the second new ball and dismissed Starc and Pat Cummins when they were looking to slog for quick runs. Australia declared at the stroke of Cummins' dismissal, setting India a never-before-achieved 444 to win. It may have been a nostalgia-inducing moment among old-timers at the ground. In 1979, a Sunil Gavaskar double hundred had inspired India to a thrilling draw at the Oval. They finished on 429 for 8 after being set 438 by England. There is still a chance that Sunday may bring similar levels of excitement. India lost their first wicket of what ended up as the last ball before tea, following a near-in-a-ball opening partnership of 41. Scott Boland got one to straighten and kick in the corridor, Shubman Gill pushed at it with hard hands, and Cameron Green dived low to his left to pluck out a superlative gully catch, his second of the match. Gill stood his ground, though, and the decision went up to the third umpire. As is often the case with these low grabs, replays seemed inconclusive, but the decision went in Australia's favour. India may have still felt a little cross with themselves at stumps, though, losing perhaps a wicket more than they would have liked by then, two of them to aggressive shots. Rohit Sharma was LBW to Nathan Lyon, missing a sweep from a stump-to-stump line, and Cheteshwar Pujara toe-ended an attempted ramp over the slips of a Pat Cummins bouncer. Both batters will argue, though, that these are shots they usually play well. They will also argue that the same positivity had helped them stitch a second wicket stand of 51 in 77 balls. The 2 wickets, however, fell in the space of 5 balls, turning 92 for 1 to 93 for 3. It was the perfect opening for Australia to bulldoze through, but Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane were having none of it. They ended the day reprising the same positivity that had gone before, putting on an unbroken 71 for the 4th wicket, with both batters looking in excellent ball-striking rhythm. Conditions, too, didn't seem to test them, with the pitch showing far less tendency to produce inconsistent bounce than it had done through the first 3 innings of the match. Kohli and Rahane ended the day with control percentages of 93 and 97 respectively. As they safely negotiated the last over of the day, a largely India-supporting crowd was in fine voice, a section of them belting out this number from the 1975 blockbuster Sholay, "Ye dosti, hum nahi todenge, we will never break this friendship." Australia will want to break it as soon as possible when day 5 dawns. Under bright skies, and on an oval pitch that seemed to ease out against all expectations, India's batters set up a potentially thrilling final day, racing to 164 for 3 at more than 4 and over to keep alive their pursuit of a world record 4th innings target. Australia remained favourites, with India needing a further 280 on the final day, but they may have a lot of hard work ahead of them to take the 7 remaining wickets, with the second new ball 40 overs away. On days 3 and 4, India showed why they have been the best test side since the World Test Championship began, as they kept asking Australia to come back with their best, but they had fallen so far behind on the first 2 days that even on the 5th they had only a glimmer of hope. Hope it still was, especially given how dead the pitch had looked on the 4th evening. On the 5th morning, though, Scott Boland put in the kind of performance you expect from a champion. India began the day needing 280 with 7 wickets in hand, but the 4th wicket stand between Virat Kohli and Ajinkya Rahane was worth 71 already. Boland was relentless with his length and line until, in the 7th over of the day, he bowled the perfect ball fuller and wider. Kohli had a drive at it, and the edge was swallowed by a diving Steven Smith at second slip. In the same over, Boland dismissed Ravindra Jadeja with the perfect ball to a left-hand batter, angling in from around the stumps, pitching on a length, seaming against the angle, and taking the edge through to the keeper. Rahane, India's best batter in the first innings, still kept up the fight, adding 33 for the 6th wicket with KS Bharat, but he finally played a loose drive away from the body to a length ball from Mitchell Starc. It was the first wicket for the profligate Starc, whose place in the first Ashes Test might be up for debate if Josh Hazlewood is fit. It was only a matter of time once Rahane was out. Shardul Thakur was trapped LBW by Nathan Lyon from around the wicket. Umesh Yadav gloved a short ball from Starc, and Lyon took out the last 2, finishing the match before lunch. India fought hard for 6 sessions starting with the 3rd day to give themselves some hope on the final day, but Australia finally broke the resistance to win the World Test Championship for the first time. Twice runners-up now, India have beaten Australia in the last 4 Test series between them, 2 in India, 2 in Australia, but Australia were the superior side in the conditions in England, where they will now play the Ashes against the hosts. This was Australia's ninth ICC title, making them the only team to have won at least one of each trophy: 5 ODI World Cups, 2 ODI Champions Trophies, 1 T20 World Cup, and now the World Test Championship.